Do you ever stop and wonder how the cheapest little things from the 1970s somehow turned into luxuries only rich people seem to afford today? It's strange, isn't it? Well, that's the lens we're walking through today. Let's take a walk back through history and explore 20 of these items. You remember what it felt like to imagine your future, right? Sitting at a worn wooden desk, tapping the edge of your notebook, thinking about college, not as a gamble, not as a financial trap, but as a step. College was just there, not free, but reasonable. You could get in your car, drive to campus, walk into an office, and pay tuition the way you paid for tires or rent. The numbers were small enough to fit into your world. Now picture the paper. Thin, slightly yellowed from age, with the college's letterhead stamped in blue. Tuition for the semester. A few $100. When you held that paper, your hand didn't sweat. You didn't feel your heart sink. Education was something you could buy outright with part-time jobs and summer shifts. You didn't need a financial aid counselor to explain interest rates. You just signed up, showed up, and worked your way through. Today, tuition isn't a number. It's a sentence. 5 figures just to walk through the door. 6 if you blink. Parents take out loans. Students carry balances that follow them into their 30s and 40s. College has the price tag of a luxury car, except the car actually belongs to you at the end. When you think back to your first campus tour, the smell of old books, the dorm hallways echoing with someone's record player, don't you wonder how something so ordinary became something so unreachable? What was the first college campus you ever set foot on? Now let's talk about something even more intimate. Your first home. Not the dream house you cut out of magazines, but the one you actually imagined owning. The one whose front door you planned to paint. The one where you pictured holidays, kids, or just peace. For you, owning a home wasn't a fantasy. It was a life step. In the 1970s, people bought homes the way people today buy used SUVs. Carefully, but confidently. Think about that first house you walked into. The carpet was probably shag, gold, green, or rust. The air smelled faintly of furniture polish and whatever the previous owner cooked last. You couldn't stop imagining your sofa in the corner or your dishes in the tiny kitchen. And the real estate agent, they didn't look at you like they were doing you a favor. They knew you could afford it. Everyone knew, because back then, a home didn't demand a lifetime of debt. A couple with a single income could buy one. You could pay your mortgage and still have something left to live your life. Now, houses feel like collectibles for the elite. Bidding wars, cash buyers, investors buying entire neighborhoods like they're stocking shelves. You see a "for sale" sign today, and you don't even bother to look twice. Not because you don't dream, but because you don't want to hurt yourself with a number you already know is too big. Do you remember the first time you imagined what color you'd paint your future living room? Now let's step outside and talk about something you didn't appreciate until you got older. Healthcare. In the 1970s, healthcare wasn't cheap, but it was human. You could walk into a doctor's office without rehearsing your explanation or wondering how badly the bill would sting. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and magazines that had been flipped through too many times. Your doctor knew your name. They knew your family. They weren't rushing. They weren't typing. They were treating you. You paid the bill and you moved on with your day. Today, healthcare feels like a maze, a system you navigate with dread, because at the end of the hallway isn't your doctor, it's a bill. And if you need a specialist, forget it. You get one look at the cost and suddenly you're weighing your pain against your finances like they're equal trades. We've reached a point where staying healthy feels like something reserved for people who can afford the premium version of life. Do you remember the last doctor who actually looked you in the eye instead of at a screen? Let's lighten the mood for a second. I want you to imagine a ticket stub. Thin cardboard, edges a little frayed, the ink slightly smudged from your fingers. Maybe it was cream-colored, or maybe it was bright orange. The band of names stamped across the front. Led Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac, Paul McCartney, whoever lit up your world at the time. You bought that ticket for a few bucks. No algorithms, no dynamic pricing, no extra charges for pressing the confirm purchase button. You didn't have to take out a small loan to see a musician who barely existed in your imagination yet. You walked up to a booth, handed over cash, stuck the stub in your pocket, and counted the days. And when the night came, the smell of beer and popcorn, the heat of the crowd, the bright shimmer of stage lights, music filling the air so thick you could feel it in your chest. Those memories didn't cost you a paycheck. They were the reward for showing up. Today, those same artists, sometimes literally the same artists, charge prices that feel like they're meant for the ultra-wealthy. Concerts aren't events, they're investments. What's the first concert you ever saw? Let's bring it even closer. Picture a movie theater in the 1970s. The marquee buzzing softly, the smell of buttered popcorn drifting out every time the glass doors swung open. You walked in with a couple of dollars, enough for the ticket, maybe even popcorn if you felt loose. The seats were squeaky, the screen was a little grainy, but none of that mattered. The movie pulled you in, and for 90 minutes, your entire world paused. Going to the movies wasn't a treat. It was Tuesday. It was what you did when you didn't know what else to do. A few coins got you a story. Now, a ticket alone costs more than an entire night out used to. If you want IMAX, Dolby, or whatever new acronym they've invented, prepare spare your wallet. The theaters are nicer, sure. Leather seats, mood lighting, maybe even a bar. But the magic isn't in the amenities. It was in the accessibility. And somehow, that part got lost. What's the movie you saw most often in theaters when you were young? Now let's talk about something quieter, but just as shocking: coffee. In the 1970s, coffee didn't have a personality. It didn't have tasting notes. It didn't come with foam art. It simply existed. Hot, strong, poured from a glass pot with an orange or brown handle. Diners smelled like it. Break rooms relied on it. You could buy a cup for a handful of change without thinking twice. Today, coffee shops feel like lounges for the financially blessed. $5, $6, $8 for a drink you finish in 10 minutes. And if you want something flavored or oat milk infused, prepare to pay more. Coffee turned into a lifestyle, and lifestyle turned into luxury. Do you remember the first diner where you sipped coffee like an adult for the very first time? Let's keep walking through these memories together, because the next one is something you didn't even think of as artisanal back then. You just called it bread. In the 1970s, a loaf of bread was a quiet presence in your kitchen. Soft, simple, wrapped in thin plastic that crinkled softly when you opened it. Maybe it sat next to a jar of peanut. You probably grabbed it on autopilot during grocery trips, tossing it into the cart without thinking twice. It cost a handful of coins, and everyone bought the same few brands without debating ingredients or fermentation times. But the best bread wasn't just store-bought. Maybe you lived near a neighborhood bakery, the kind with a screen door that slapped shut behind you, and a smell so warm and comforting it felt like your shoulders softened the moment you stepped inside. A fresh loaf would still be warm in the bag, the steam fogging the thin wax paper slightly. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't sourdough with a 48-hour starter. It was just bread. Affordable, accessible, comforting. Today, bread has an attitude, a personality, a resume. Small batch, wild yeast, heritage flour, all beautiful ideas, but expensive ones. You grab a single loaf at a modern bakery, and suddenly you're paying what used to be the price of a whole grocery trip. Bread, one of the oldest, simplest foods, has transformed into a marker of class. Something once cheap and universal is now photographed and prized. Do you remember the smell of the bread aisle in the store you grew up visiting? Now let's talk about something that once came wrapped in thin foil, rattled slightly when you carried it, and lived on the bottom shelf of grocery stores: wine. Back then, wine didn't perform for you. It didn't need a story about the vineyard or the soil or the altitude. A decent bottle cost around $1 or $2. You picked it up without thinking much more than red or white. Maybe you grabbed it for dinner with friends, or a quiet Friday at home, or because someone told you a particular label was pretty good. Picture the bottle in your hands. Smooth glass, a cork that sometimes splintered if you twisted too hard, a label printed in a style that feels almost retro now. You didn't swirl it. You didn't examine the color. You poured it into thick, slightly cloudy glasses and drank it while sitting on someone's couch that was probably covered in a knitted blanket. Wine wasn't an experience. It was a drink. Today, wine has reached a kind of luxury status you never saw coming. $20, $30, $40 for a bottle that used to be $2. Entire stores devoted to categorizing it like gemstones. Tasting notes written like poetry. It's not that people enjoy wine more now. It's that they pay for the privilege of enjoying it. What was the first bottle of wine you ever bought as an adult? Now, let's step into something so simple, yet so changed, it almost hurts to think about: the hamburger. A burger wasn't gourmet. It wasn't elevated. It wasn't grass-fed, Wagyu smashed, truffle-infused, or served on a brioche bun. It was a diner burger. Griddle-fried, sizzling in its own juices, stacked with a slice of tomato, maybe a ring of onion, and wrapped in thin white paper that soaked up a little grease. You could smell it the moment the plate landed in front of you. That smell, savory, warm, honest, always hit the same way. And the price? Under $1. You could buy two if you were hungry. Diners weren't themed experiences. They were people's living rooms with fluorescent lights. The counter was worn from elbows and coffee cups. The waitress knew your order before you sat down. Today, a good burger comes with branding and presentation. You pay $18 for a burger that looks like it was built for a photo shoot. The bun has a shine. The lettuce has a pedigree. The beef comes with a backstory. And you sit there remembering how something so simple tasted better when nobody tried to make it profound. Do you remember your go-to burger order from the diner you grew up near? Now think about ice cream, a treat so innocent it feels strange to call it expensive. In the 1970s, ice cream was a joy you could buy with pocket change. A scoop in a simple cone handed to you by a teenager working their first summer job. The parlor smelled like sugar and waffle cones, and the lights were bright enough to make the ice sparkle. You'd lean in, lick the drip before it ran down your hand, and enjoy every second without thinking about the cost. The flavors were simple but perfect. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, maybe butter pecan if you felt grown up. The entire moment, the cold bite, the sweet sweetness. The sound of families talking nearby was pure. Today, a single scoop can run you $8. And it comes in flavors that sound like novels. Toasted lavender honey, bourbon caramel swirl, vegan sea salt oat crumble. Delicious? Sure, but expensive. Ice cream, the universal childhood treat, now feels like a luxury date night item. Do you remember the exact flavor you ordered as a kid every single time? Let's stay at the table a little longer because the next memory hits the stomach even harder. The classic diner breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon, maybe a side of potatoes. Served hot, served fast, and served cheap. You could walk into a diner for under $1.50 and walk out full, and you felt good. There was something about breakfast cooked on a flat-top grill that tasted like comfort. The toast slightly uneven, the eggs a little crisp around the edges, the potatoes sizzling with a hint of onion. The diner itself was part of the charm. Chrome trim, small booths, the clatter of dishes behind the counter. Someone always seemed to be pouring coffee, and that coffee, free refills, endless. No one called it a bottomless cup. It was just normal. Breakfast was a ritual, not a financial decision. Today, brunch has replaced breakfast, and with it the price. $15, $25 for eggs, toast, and a little creative garnish. Breakfast, the most ordinary of meals, now lives inside expensive restaurants with long lines and louder conversations. Where was the diner you went to for breakfast when you were young? Now zoom out to the broader picture. Eating out in general. A family dinner wasn't an event. It was routine. You could walk into a local restaurant, grab a table, and feed a family of 4 for $20. The plates were sturdy, the napkins were thin, and the atmosphere was real. Maybe the kids got impatient and banged their forks. Maybe someone spilled their cola, but the whole experience felt accessible, a normal part of life. Restaurants in the 1970s weren't curated experiences with mood lighting and reclaimed wood. They were straightforward places with food that tasted like someone's aunt made it. You didn't worry about tips, percentages, or extra charges. You just ate, talked, and went home. Today, a simple dinner can wipe out $100 before you even realize what happened. The bill arrives and you sit there trying to remember when eating out stopped being the default and started becoming the indulgence. What was your family's go-to restaurant back then? And what about fast food? Once the cheapest, quickest option on the map. A hamburger, fries, and a drink cost less than a single dollar in the 1970s. You could pull up in your car, roll down your window, and order without thinking about whether you should have cooked at home. The paper bag would warm your lap, the fries were salty, and the soda came with those light, flexible plastic lids that always made a quiet pop when you pressed the center. Fast food wasn't premium. No fancy items, no special menus, just fast, cheap food. Perfect for teenagers, parents on the go, and anyone craving something simple. Today, the same combo costs $10 to $15. Fast food has trended upward until it's barely fast and definitely not cheap. Somehow, the most inexpensive option has climbed into a price category that feels absurd. Do you remember the exact drive-thru where you ordered your first fast food meal? Let's step out of town entirely now, onto the open road. Travel in the 1970s carried a kind of magic you can still feel if you sit quietly enough. Motels glowing with neon signs, the buzzing hum of vacancy lights, rooms with patterned bedspreads and small TVs that clicked when you turned the dial. A night cost $20, maybe $30 if you were splurging. The sheets were clean, the shower ran hot. That was enough. Flying was cheap too, shockingly cheap compared to now. You could buy a round-trip ticket without holding your breath. You'd walk through the airport carrying a bag that didn't need to meet 10 different size requirements. People dressed up to fly, but the price wasn't the reason. They did it out of habit, out of a sense of occasion. Traveling didn't feel like a privilege. It felt like a possibility. Today, travel sits behind a financial gate. Hotels cost hundreds per night. Flights spike with no warning. Even a weekend away can feel like a luxury purchase reserved for people with savings dedicated just to vacation. Where was the first place you ever traveled on your own? There's a small sound you probably remember perfectly. A tiny metallic click, followed by the soft hum of clippers. We're stepping now into something so ordinary it once barely registered. The haircut. In the 1970s, a haircut wasn't a luxury or a self-care ritual or an experience with aromatherapy and curated playlists. It was a task, a 10-minute appointment, a quick trim that cost a few bucks, maybe even less if you knew the barber. Picture the shop, a striped pole, turning slowly outside. Inside, the strong scent of aftershave, Barbicide in a clear blue jar, and the warm leather of old chairs. The mirror didn't flatter you, it reflected you as you were. The barber talked about the weather or the local team, and you nodded, while hair slid down the cape onto the floor. You left feeling lighter, cleaner, and you didn't once think about how much it cost. Today, a professional haircut can cost $40, $50, $100 depending on where you live. Salons and barbershops feel like boutiques. You book online, you pay deposits, You choose from menus of services that didn't exist back then. Even a simple cut has turned into an expense you schedule carefully. Do you remember your childhood barber or stylist? The one who cut your hair for years? Now, let's talk about something smaller, but somehow even more shocking: manicures and pedicures. In the 1970s, these were nice treats. Sure, but affordable ones. A few dollars, a quick polish. Maybe you went with a friend or treated yourself on a Friday. The tools rattled softly on metal trays. The smell of polish hung in the air, and you walked out feeling just a little more put together. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't branded as self-care. It was simply part of grooming, tucked between errands or done before a special night out. You didn't make an appointment weeks in advance, you didn't spend half your afternoon in a spa-like atmosphere, and you certainly didn't consider the price twice. Today, getting your nails done can cost as much as a dinner out. Gel, dips, acrylics, shapes, designs, upgrades. It's mesmerizing how much the industry has grown, but also how much the price has too. What used to be a $5 treat is suddenly a $50 routine. Do you remember the color you always asked for when you were young? Now, let's return to the dinner table. But this time, we're not talking about burgers or breakfast. We're talking about steak. The kind of steak you used to grab from the butcher or grocery store once in a while when you wanted something special. In the 1970s, even a good ribeye didn't cost more than a few bucks per pound. You could make steak night without adding it to a budget or checking the price twice. You can almost hear it now, the sound of the meat sizzling on a cast iron pan or hitting the grill with a burst of smoke, the smell that filled the kitchen. The seasoning was simple: salt, pepper, maybe a little butter, maybe nothing at all. The meal felt rich, satisfying, celebratory, and yet inexpensive. Today, buying a good steak feels like buying jewelry. Prices double, triple, jump depending on labels, grading, and sourcing. Restaurants charge $50 or more for a single cut. What used to be an accessible luxury for any household has become a symbol of indulgence reserved for special occasions, if that. When was the last time you remember buying a steak without checking the price first? And speaking of things that once felt routine but now punch your wallet, let's talk about dentist visits. In the 1970s, you'd walk into a small office that smelled faintly of mint and antiseptic. The receptionist knew your name. The wait was short, the cleaning was quick, and when you walked out, the bill didn't feel like a punishment. The equipment was simpler, the procedures straightforward, and insurance actually covered things. You could get an exam, a cleaning, maybe even x-rays without breaking into a sweat when you thought about the cost. Today, dental care feels like a negotiation. Insurance doesn't cover half of what you need. A routine cleaning can cost hundreds. Anything more complex, fillings, crowns, root canals, shoots into the stratosphere. Oral health has quietly become a luxury, even though it's one of the most vital parts of overall well-being. Do you remember the little plastic toy or sticker you used to get after your childhood dentist visits? Now let's step into something that once defined adulthood for many people: buying a new car. In the 1970s, a brand new car could cost less than $3,000. A new car was actually attainable, not just for wealthy people, but for families, teenagers getting their first vehicle, young couples starting out. You could walk around a dealership, smell the vinyl interior, test the radio that clicked loudly when you turned the dial, and feel like owning a new car was possible. Even if you weren't flush with cash, there was something magical about that new car smell. Not the artificially engineered version they spray in cars today. The real thing: warm vinyl, fresh rubber, new carpet. The engines were simple, the dashboard straightforward, and you could fix half the problems under the hood with a wrench and a weekend afternoon. Cars were machines you understood. Today, new cars cost more than some people's first homes did. $30,000 is considered entry-level. $40,000 is normal. $50,000 is common. Cars are full of tech, sensors, cameras, and computers, all of which raise both the price and the cost of repairs. Buying new feels like an achievement for the wealthy, not a rite of passage. What was the very first car you bought, or the first one you dreamed of owning? And finally, let's walk into a memory that glows with its own emotional light: weddings. In the 1970s, weddings were heartfelt, simple, joyful gatherings. A backyard, a community hall, a church basement, a dress sewn by a friend or bought off a rack, a reception catered by relatives, or a buffet made by a local cook who knew everyone in town. You can picture it: the music playing from a modest speaker system, the smell of homemade dishes, the laughter of friends who showed up not to judge or photograph, but to celebrate. You didn't need elaborate decor or designer gowns. You needed love, a place, food, and the people who mattered most. The whole day cost maybe $2,000 to $5,000, and it felt like more than enough. Today, weddings have become full productions: venues, floral installations, lighting design, photographers who cost as much as cars, dresses with multi-thousand-dollar price tags, and expectations inflated by social media. The average wedding now costs tens of thousands, sometimes more. Something that was once deeply personal has become soaked in financial pressure. What is the most memorable wedding you ever attended? Now that we've walked through all these pieces of life — food, travel, grooming, health, celebrations — you can feel the through line. The world world used to feel accessible. Not cheap, not perfect, but reachable. And that reachability shaped how you lived. You didn't have to be rich to enjoy the basics. You didn't need savings to take your family out, fix yourself up, or treat yourself to something nice. You weren't walking around with a calculator in your head all day. You weren't scared of bills or menus or moments that were supposed to bring joy. Something shifted, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. And now, when you look around, you see price tags where memories used to be. You see young people struggling with things you once took for granted. You see luxuries stamped onto items that were once just normal life. And sometimes, if you're honest, you feel a little protective of the past because you remember how it really was. Not perfect, not easy, but fairer. Do you ever catch yourself wishing you could walk back into even one of those moments just to feel how affordable life used to be? If you're like most people who lived through that era, you didn't fully appreciate the world you grew up in until you saw what came after it. Appreciation has a funny way of working backwards. You often don't realize how light something felt until you've carried heavier things. But here's the good news. Nostalgia isn't about going back. It's about remembering what mattered so you can see what's missing. It's a kind of compass, a kind of quiet truth teller. And if you've made it all the way here with me, walking through each memory like we were flipping through the same family album, then let me invite you to become part of this channel's little community. If you grew up in the 1970s, or even if you didn't but love the stories, leave a comment sharing the one thing you remember being cheap back then that's unbelievably expensive now. Someone else will read it and say, "Oh my God, I remember that too." And if you want more nostalgic stories like this, more late-night conversations about the way things used to be, hit like, subscribe, and stay close. We've got plenty more memories to walk through together. Because the cheapest things in the 1970s may have become luxuries today, but your memories of them, those are still free.